So much for shock and awe. A new Wikileaks release details shock and horror in Iraq. One of the latest leaked State Department cables alleges that back during Bush's presidency in 2006, U.S. troops executed at least 10 Iraqi civilians, including 5 children and 4 women, and then called in an airstrike to destroy the evidence. At the time, Bush's military officials denied the incident. But as this Wikileaks release shows, a UN special investigator uncovered evidence to the contrary, noting that morgue reports showed that all the victims were handcuffed and shot in the head execution style. The investigator, Philip Alston, writes in the cable, U.S. troops entered the house, handcuffed all residents, and executed all of them. After the initial intervention, a U.S. air raid ensued that destroyed the house. So why is it that we have to rely on Wikileaks again to reveal to the American people the horrors of war? And just how widespread is this sort of gruesome behavior in our military operations in the Middle East? Joining me now for some answers is Raed Jarrar, an Iraqi-American blogger and political analyst who was just in Iraq 2 weeks ago. Raed, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Is this as shocking as it seems, or is this just how war is?
It is shocking, but not for the reasons that the U.S. audiences would think. I think Iraqis are used to these types of stories. They know this particular story 5 years ago because the Iraqi media did cover it, and an Iraqi human rights organization called Hammurabi did an expose on this particular story. I was surprised today because the U.S. public don't seem to know much about this, and I think the story here is the cover-up of the incident, of the crime itself. Because I went back, for example, to March of 2006, and I read all of the news on the New York Times or the announcements of the Pentagon regarding this incident. It just sounds like any other incident that day. The U.S. military was driving, someone shot at them, someone from Al-Qaeda was there, they shot back, they captured this guy, and there was some collateral damage. This is what we hear every day in the news. The New York Times bought that, they rebroadcasted the same things that they were told by the military. And I think that is the story, that this exposes how the war machine works. We have hundreds of this story that happened, and all of them were covered up by the media, the Pentagon, and the government.
To what extent is that different, or is it not, for that matter, from the cover-ups of atrocities committed by other governments, by Saddam Hussein's own government, by Iranian government, in that long war, by, again, kind of a variation of, they say war is hell, and in my opinion, when George Bush and Dick Cheney lied us into this war, they opened the gates of hell. Isn't there a certain amount of this, tragically, that just always comes along with war? You're going to have some very, very bad actors. They're drawn to wars. I
completely agree with you. I think what's happening in Iraq and what this incident shows is not an occupation, a military occupation that has gone wrong, that was mismanaged. I think this is how military occupations look like.
It's just the nature of war.
This is how it looks like. And so when they put 11 members of a family in a room and execute them and then call for an airstrike to cover up, that doesn't seem like a single incident. No one will come up with such a sophisticated scheme and execute 11 people with cold blood one time. Right. This is maybe a daily recurrent event that has been happening in Iraq. When we talk about 1 million Iraqis killed in the last 8 years alone, these numbers are huge numbers, and these incidents explain how Iraq looked and it still looks like on a daily basis.
You just came back from Iraq. What is the perception of Iraqis, by Iraqis, of America? And isn't there a certain damned if we do, damned if we don't right now? I mean, if we pull out, there's going to be a certain type of crisis. If we don't pull out, there's going to be another kind of crisis. Can you describe what those might be?
I don't think so. I disagree with this notion that if we withdrew, the sky will fall on Iraqis, or if we withdrew and give Iraqis back their freedom, that we will be responsible as Americans on how Iraqis would run their own nation. These are, not realistic. It's very paternalistic, does not view Iraqis as peer humans who can take care of themselves. I think the way that Iraqis view the U.S. in general is not very negatively, but the way that Iraqis view the U.S. in Iraq is very negative. People hate the U.S. in Iraq. They don't want the U.S. to be in Iraq. And I think they want two things to stop these incidents from happening. They want, number one, the U.S. to withdraw completely before the end of this year, like President Obama has promised. Right. And number two, all of these incidents that took place to be investigated, so that Iraqis who were harmed are compensated, and the criminals who are behind these acts are held responsible.
You've written about this, about President Obama saying he's going to pull out of Iraq. And, you know, I think there's a lot of skepticism in this country, especially after we just built this massive palace there, the U.S. Embassy. But nonetheless, if he does, what is the most likely outcome in Iraq? Is it possible that the country will split up, you know, the various factions, or will there be another strongman, or could there be a full-blown democracy, or will it become an Islamic state? Or, I mean, what, in your opinion, have you been there?
I think all the above. These are possibilities for the future of Iraq, and Iraqis will decide what they want. They want a democracy that looks like the U.S., it's their choice. They want an Islamic state, it's their choice as well. As a secular person, I would love to see a secular democracy there, and a secular democracy here in the U.S. as well, by the way. But I think Iraqis can choose whatever works for their country. Now, I think the current plan for withdrawal is not unrealistic. The U.S. is planning to withdraw all the Department of Defense soldiers by the end of this year, bringing down the number to 0 U.S. soldiers and 0 bases. But there is other types of intervention that the U.S. is keeping. There are around 16,000 personnel who will stay with the State Department, and I think those should leave as well within the next few years. But when it comes to the withdrawal at the end of this year, I'm not very skeptical. I think it is doable. I think it is a must, actually, that President Obama fulfills his promises.
Let's hope you're right. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks a lot.
Very nice to meet you. It's time to end this senseless violence. Call back the dogs of war.
Justice is not about agenda. It's not about mobilizing people. It's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.